At the heart of Edwards Air Force Base, a symphony of dedication and teamwork takes flight. Its sacred lakebed, an arena of sand, cradles the echoes and bears witness to the triumphs and tribulations of flight test. Every takeoff, every soaring achievement is the result of a harmonious ensemble, a testament to the power of unity and purpose. It starts with our educators, who light the spark of curiosity in our minds. Builders and landscapers who transform this earth into a backdrop for innovation. Maintainers, unsung heroes, ensuring every aircraft is ready for the sky, often in the dead of night. Engineers, architects of dreams, designing the future of aviation with precision and ingenuity. Doctors, nurses, and medtechs, silent sentinels of health that keep the heart of our base pumping. Logisticians, skilled tacticians, orchestrating the intricate coordination of resources and supply chains. Defenders, steadfast guardians, providing stability and safety to our people. And don't forget the cooks, clerks, and countless support staff who keep the base running seamlessly, fueling the passion for those who fly. All of these roles, seemingly unrelated, empower Edwards to deliver crucial testing to our Air Force. Here, at the center of aerospace testing universe, we have played a role in the development of virtually every aircraft in the United States Air Force since World War II. It's airmen, civilian, and contractors that contribute to our success and enable our Air Force to dominate the aerospace environment. Our people are the threads that weave the tapestry of flight. Our belief in a shared dream fuels every endeavor. Our unwavering commitment to excellence sets the stage for greatness. At Edwards Air Force Base, we have made the impossible possible. We prove that the skies have no limits, and we inspire generations to come. Together, we are Team Edwards, testing tomorrow's war-winning capabilities today.
Go ahead and come on down. You're going to be standing for a bit. We've got about 75 minutes or so here this morning. So, Chief, let's play a little game. Let's start out with a little game. All right. So we got an RMO here.
Okay.
We'll call that heads. We'll call that tails.
Roger that.
And I want everybody to think what the probability of heads and what the probability of tails is.
Anybody? Okay.
50-50. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
All right. So Chief and I know how the coin turned out. What's your probability of heads and tails now? Is it the same for Chief and I? So we're going to talk about this in the context. We know something that Sergeant Dager back there in the back of the auditorium doesn't know. And part of what we're going to spend today doing is going through multiple different levels of the organization, trying to figure out where are we taking risk and making the organization as a whole more aware of that risk across the organization. So next slide, please. So risk stems from uncertainty about the world. We don't know what's going to happen. Our crystal balls are generally pretty opaque. And there's typically also a loss aspect associated with risk. So we don't really talk about the risk of winning the lottery, if you play the lottery. Now, you might talk about the risk of financial ruin, of the opportunity cost of spending money buying lottery tickets, but you're not going to look at having a winning lottery ticket as a risk, because that generally has a favorable outcome. You could talk about the risk of having a very lousy life, not achieving all the great things that you thought from the lottery winning. But there's generally a loss associated with risk, but it ultimately stems from uncertainty. And so, what's the likelihood that Chairman Xi starts World War III in the next couple of years? What's the likelihood that the rapid modernization that the PLA is going through outpaces the modernization that we are doing right here at Edwards Air Force Base? That's uncertainty, and that's risk. And that's risk to the nation, and risk to our mission can actually change that risk to the nation. So go ahead and go to the next slide, please. You may have seen this. So on 26 December, Mao Zedong's birthday, and this was very deliberate. Nothing happens in China on social media. These are all lifted out of Chinese social media. Nothing happens. Not one, but two new aircraft were revealed, were flown. The U.S. hasn't officially designated the one on the right yet. It's right there, Chinese, or the Chengdu Aircraft Corporation, CAC. The pundits are calling it the JH-36 because the tail number has a 36 on it, and it follows the J-35. But China they are rapidly modernizing. Next slide. December was also an eventful time. So, middle of December, there was a unannounced PLA-N, People Liberation Army Navy exercise that completely encircled this is the largest naval exercise, probably since the end of World War II. It was 3 times by number of ships than what RIMPAC is, our big exercise. Now, when we do RIMPAC, we actually announce it well in advance because we don't want to inadvertently start a war. China just did this. In fact, it wasn't necessarily obvious that they were doing an exercise. They encircled the island. They set up these walls out to the first island chain. They did mock attacks of both aircraft coming inbound to China as well as attacking ships within this area, doing mock attacks without telling the world that they were just doing an exercise. It could have been the preamble to an invasion. That's uncertainty. That's risk. Earlier in December, the U.S. acknowledged Salt Typhoon, a persistent Chinese cyber espionage. We've already known about, and we've talked in this forum, about Volt Typhoon, all the Chinese malware that is in our critical infrastructure. So a lot of our grid, electrical infrastructure, water, transportation systems, the SCADA systems that control those. There's a lot of Chinese malware on those. Salt Typhoon has been going on for about 4 years. There are at least a dozen now telecom companies that have been acknowledged to have been infected, and we can't actually get them out. They have root authority on the servers, and it appears that what they are targeting, and this is all open source, I'm not revealing anything, it appears that what they are targeting is our senior government officials and all the networks. So they have downloaded every single person that President-elect Trump has called in the last 4 years. AT&T is one of the companies. Verizon is one of the companies. Guess what? Our government phones, mine's there in the back. They have a record. The PLA, the CCP, now knows who my government phone has talked to for at least the last 4 years, and they're still there and we can't get them out. That's uncertainty. That's risk. It is a very, very dangerous world right now. Next slide. The pace of modernization that the PLA is going through. This is the current as of March 23. So a year ago. I guess almost 2 years ago now. It's 2025. How about that? Go ahead and go to the next slide. And go back one for me. And go forward one. And do it one more time. The pace of modernization that the PLA is going through is unprecedented. It is far outpacing what we are doing. We are the smallest and oldest that we have ever been. The Chinese, the PLA, is the largest and most modern that it has ever been. That is risk. That is uncertainty. And that's why what we are doing here at Edwards Air Force Base is extremely important, because we are, go ahead and go to the next slide. We are here at Edwards developing and modernizing and doing those things that will change Chairman Xi's calculus about starting World War III. We cannot afford to have to take a step backwards because we have a mishap. Our mission is too important. And China's doing it right now too. So let's go ahead and take a journey. So this is Edwards Air Force Base. Go ahead and advance for me. China also has an Edwards Air Force Base. And so we'll take a journey across the globe. Dingjin Air Force Base, out in the Gobi Desert. They picked a desert just like we did. And so up there in the Gobi Desert, and there it is. Our runway is longer here, I have to say. We got 1,000 feet on what they have, and we have a lot more runways too, with almost 69 miles of runways. This is their newest runway here. They're doing a lot of drone and kind of what we are calling the combat collaborative aircraft development. This is where a lot of those hangars where a lot of that stuff is coming from. This is also located adjacent to missile ranges and satellite launching and anti-satellite ranges as well. They also, go ahead and build for me. Look right here. Go ahead and build. So that's 4 miles away from the main runway. Taichung International Airport is in northwest Taiwan. Do we think we know what they're doing? What they're planning? Have you changed? So Chief and I, when we flipped the coin and we looked at it, we were able to update our probabilities based on what we knew. Based on what you know now, can you update your assessment of the risk to the world and how important our mission is? This is not the only thing they're planning, and I think they know that we have satellites. Go ahead and go to the next slide for me. So in the desert, about 300 miles away, further to the west in the Gobi Desert, so just north of that Dingjin Army Airfield, they actually have places where they can launch ballistic missiles, about 300 miles away. They have this in the Gobi Desert. There's actually a couple targets like that. Some of them have radar reflectors, so they actually look like a carrier, the Gerald Ford, for a ballistic missile that's coming back in and has to discriminate, a target. They also have destroyers. They have destroyers actually on rails that go across the desert. It's fun going and actually, it's not fun. It's easy in Google Earth to go in there. It's actually a little bit scary. I'll give you the coordinates if you want. You can just play around in Google Earth. You can look at this. The rail tracks are taking evasive action, so the missiles can actually be tested. What is the destroyer doing as it's weaving through the ocean? You can look at the radius of curvature of those railroad tracks. You want to update your probabilities about the risk to the world? Next slide. That's why we're doing this. This is one of the many, many things that you are working on right here that will change Chairman Xi's calculus about our readiness and change his incentives about whether or not today is the day to start World War III. We cannot afford to have the B-21 take a step back. And so, today is, you're going to watch a message from the Chief of Staff of the Air Force here before our Chief gives you his message. This is a stand-up day. So across the Air Force, that risk management, that readiness to go, needs to be discussed across. And our mission is a little bit more important. And we are professional risk managers. Whether or not you're a tester, or you support the test mission, your job is part of that professional risk management that we do as testers. And so today, as we break down into subsequently smaller and smaller units, I want you to go through those scenarios. There's somebody here, so Chief and I, we knew what it was after we looked at it. How do we let the digger in the back there know? That's what we need from a risk awareness standpoint. We got to keep this moving along. Next slide. So risk is uncertainty. Go ahead and build. Next slide, please. And go ahead and build. There's different types of things about the world. There's things that we know, right? There's things that are clearly deterministic all the way through, we can roll a die, we can flip a coin, we can generally say if it's a fair coin, a fair die, what the probability is going to be. There's also things that we just don't know, though we know within certain bounds. We can look at the weather. Around here, it's pretty easy to predict the weather. Other places, it's a little more difficult. All the way up to, there's things that we know we can't know. There's the limits of knowledge. So in physics, there's this idea of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, where you can only know with a certain precision the momentum and the position of a particle. And if you know one really, really well, you can't know the other. Those are fundamental limits of knowledge. That's not necessarily what we're talking about. Go ahead and build. So when we first flipped that coin, before we looked at it, this was a random uncertainty. And now it's still a random uncertainty for you. It's 50-50 so far. We've done this 4 times, and it's been twice each. So I think it's a fair coin. For you, it's still a random uncertainty. Actually, now that it's already happened, now I've already flipped it, it's actually become a knowledge uncertainty. You just don't know what the answer is. But somebody in the organization probably does. And so if we look at this matrix, go ahead and build this for me. So there's things that we know. There's the old quip, Mark Twain, about death and taxes, the only thing that's certain in the world. There's things that are just randomly uncertain, and most of your casino games are like that. You can walk in and there's the probability that you're going to lose at craps. There's also things that we don't know. So this is a chaotic system, sensitive dependence on initial conditions. You can never know with enough precision the coordinates of the initial starting conditions to actually know what the direction is going to be outside of a finite time. And so it's a fundamentally different type of uncertainty. And then, of course, there's also random uncertainty, which nothing to help. But now, unfortunately, this half of this knowledge plane right here, this knowledge uncertainty, go ahead and build. This is ignorance. And I don't use ignorance in a pejorative manner. It means that we don't know. And most of what we do in flight tests, because we're going someplace in the envelope, we've never been there before, guess what? It is that knowledge type of uncertainty. Now, there will be some folks that know some things that the rest of the organization doesn't. So when Chief and I flip this, and then look at that, 50-50 still. Somehow we have to be able to share this information. Right now, at some point in time in the future, despite what we do and our best efforts, we will have a mishap of some type. And afterwards, there's going to be somebody that said, I knew that was going to happen. That's what we're going to spend today doing. Is rather than do that post-mortem after the accident, let's do pre-mortems today. Next slide. So I think everybody's aware or familiar with the idea of situational awareness, this idea that you kind of perceive the environment and you can kind of project the current state of the system into the future and predict what's going to happen. That's situational awareness. And it's one of those things you don't really know that you've lost it until you get it back. And I can remember in pilot training, on the grade sheet, the very last thing in pilot training, and everybody who went through pilot training knows this, that it was the grade of situational awareness. And when you first started in pilot training, you were always getting like 1s and 2s. It goes up to a 4-point scale. And you're like, well, how does, I didn't know what was going on, but how did the IP know that I didn't know what was going on? But there's clues. And, it's like, your pace of radio calls and other types of things. And so there's these techniques. And so the same way, go ahead and go to the next slide for me. There's this idea of risk awareness, which is very, very analogous to situational awareness, where it's the perception of what we don't know, uncertainty, and the projected outcome from that. And so that's what we're going to spend today doing and cultivating, is developing that risk awareness, is identifying the things that we don't know, identifying the things that are maybe random or just knowledge. So, we can flip the coin. Oh, actually, it's trending heads now. Maybe you want to update your probability, your conditional probability, based on the fact that we've had 3 to 2 heads now. But we're going to spend today, trying to cultivate and fostering this risk awareness, and it's not just a one-time thing. Next slide. So go ahead and build this for me. So an accident is something that's unexpected and then has a negative outcome. Again, if you win the lottery, that's unexpected. In fact, it's very, very low probability that you win the lottery. Hate to break that to you. But it's not a negative outcome, so you're probably not going to be unhappy. So an accident is an unexpected event with a negative outcome. And a lot of what we do with our, go ahead and build, with our test hazard analysis on the test side, some of the mishap prevention that we do across the mission sets is actually either trying to prevent the unexpected event by having safeguards, or if an unexpected event happens, then we prevent the negative outcome. And if we do either of those things, then we prevent the accident. That's not enough. We actually have to go further upstream. So go ahead and do the final build for me. There's ignorance about the system. Next slide. Risk awareness is further upstream of that. In identifying, where is there risk to our mission? And it could be compliance. It could be that we are just not doing what we're supposed to be doing. We're taking a shortcut. Or maybe we're overworked. Maybe we haven't given you the resources that you need to do a task, and you're trying to get the mission done, and you're taking shortcuts. That's risk. We need to know about that. And so that's what today is all about, is to have those discussions at all of the levels down to the work center to figure out where is our next accident going to happen. And then let's make sure it doesn't happen, because our mission is too important to the nation, because we're trying to change Chairman Xi's idea about starting World War III. Next slide. Everybody know what this is? Yep, Space Shuttle Columbia. So we're coming up on, this is 2003, February 1st or 2nd. I think it's the 1st. So we're coming up on the 22nd anniversary of this. What we're doing today is more than just kind of the mechanical aspects of it. There's socio-cultural things that play into what we're doing. So if we go to the next slide, why did this happen? Why did Columbia burn up on reentry? Well, it's pretty easy. There's this foam on the bipod ramp, right there, and a chunk of that foam broke off during liftoff and hit the leading edge, hit the leading edge of the orbiter, and cracked a hole through the carbon-carbon, reinforced carbon leading edge that allowed hot plasma during reentry to get inside and then burn up the shuttle. That's what caused the accident. It's not that simple. This foam here, this is like what you have in your attic. It's very, very low density. There was a requirement for the shuttle that nothing should come off of the stack and impact the orbiter during liftoff. That was a system requirement. You know how many times this had happened before? 65 prior launches. Something had come off the orbiter. So go ahead and build for me. How do we describe the social cultural aspects that let us ignore the requirement that nothing is supposed to come off and strike the orbiter? We accepted it. So this is Nancy Levison's attempt. Oh, go ahead and build for me. There we go. So Nancy Levison is a professor at MIT. This is her attempt to kind of explain the entire system. So it's more to it than just, what caused Columbia to burn up on reentry? It's not as simple as this attic foam falling off and hitting the leading edge. It's actually more complicated than that. You have this entire social cultural system of, the priority of safety programs, delays to the launch, the fact that the shuttle was supposed to be this rapidly reusable thing. Over time, we get better. We have complacency, right? Because, it's happened 64 other times. Not a big deal. It's only foam. Never mind the requirement. And so all these things, this is a very complex thing. Humans are complicated. Our social cultural systems are complicated. That's the importance, and that's why we are not doing anything else today besides a stand-up risk management focus day. Next slide. And so that's what we're going to spend time doing. And now I think we've got a message from the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. Next.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
In 1942, just a few short months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, 16 modified B-25 Mitchells and their crews were aboard the USS Hornet under the command of Colonel Jimmy Doolittle. The initial plan was to get the bombers within 400 miles of mainland Japan, then launch them to execute the surprise raid. However, the task force was spotted by a Japanese patrol approximately 700 miles off the coast. After a quick risk assessment, the decision was made to launch the 16 bombers immediately. The raiders successfully struck their targets, and the daring mission ultimately forced the Japanese to recall combat forces for home defense. Of the 16 aircraft, 15 crash landed in China, and 1 landed in the Soviet Union. Of 80 crew members, 3 were killed in action, 3 were executed by the Japanese, and 1 died in captivity. Those airmen lifted off with mere minutes' notice, knowing executing a high-risk mission to avenge all the lives at Pearl Harbor and raise the morale of those left behind. It was their time of consequence. For us, my fellow airmen, our time of consequence is now. We are in an era of great power competition. And our Air Force is evolving how we develop airmen, generate readiness, project combat power, and develop our capabilities to deter and, if necessary, defeat our adversaries. As part of this evolution, we must develop our airmen to weave risk management into the core of everyday operations and empower teams to tackle challenges they are certain to face in contested environments. And when we talk about risk management, we are not talking about simply evaluating risk and deciding whether to act. We will act. Our mission requires it. Risk management is an active assessment and decision-making process to inform planning and execution across the full spectrum of operations. Mission Command necessitates our airmen operating at the tactical edge to solve complex problems under demanding circumstances, likely outside of our core specialty. I want you all to know you are empowered to manage risks. And to do so effectively, we must revive the mindset of disciplined execution in everything. However, disciplined operations require demonstrated excellence in the basics, vigilant adherence to standards, and bold and engaged leadership at every level. These are key tenets of an effective combat team. Now, ours is a dangerous business, one that punishes complacency and a lack of discipline. Sadly, it's often our fellow wingmen who pay the price of undisciplined operations and their deadly consequences. Over the last 12 months alone, we have lost 47 airmen and incurred $1.5 billion in lost material and weapon systems due to preventable mishaps, lack of discipline, not following established procedures or instructions, poor risk mitigation. All of these led to unnecessary losses we have incurred. This is not the foundation we need to dominate in today's security environment. We cannot be sloppy in practice and expect to win the game. And make no mistake, America expects us to win the game. That's what's at stake. To align mission readiness across the force, we intentionally built this force-wide stand-up day to develop our ability to integrate risk with readiness. It is important to foot stomp that the stand-up day is not about one mishap or one mission set. This is the beginning of an ongoing effort to prepare our service for the demands of great ground competition. Our people are the Air Force's most important asset and the heart of our combat power. We must do all we can to prepare ourselves for the uncertainties of the future and to be ready to defend our nation from any threat. I'm excited to team with you, our Department of the Air Force Safety Team, and our command leadership to empower all airmen to practice operational discipline and risk management at every level of our formation. To take full advantage of your stand-up day, do not shy away from making sensible, risk-informed decisions, and don't ignore the basics. Discipline, adherence, communication, and teamwork. Aim high.
All right, so you heard from the Chief of Staff, and now from our Chief.
Well, thanks, boss. Appreciate the opportunity. Hey, first and foremost, Happy New Year to everybody out here. Start of a new year, and we're going to talk a little bit about a different take on risk management. Everybody in here is probably familiar with operational risk management. We heard the boss talk earlier. I'm going to take a strategically simplistic approach to this, a little bit left of the bang and a little bit before, and some of the things we can do to prepare ourselves to make educated decisions. So bear with me, my slides are not quite as advanced as the boss's, but as we walk through this, I want you guys to wake up, take some notes, and then pass this to the other individuals that aren't here. I think some of this is really, really good block and tackling as we move through and talk about full spectrum risk management from my perspective. Next slide. All right, what is full spectrum risk management? To me, there's two parts of risk management. There's operational risk management, which we heard Chief Alvin talk about in his video. But there's also the personal risk management that you do for yourself, right? There's a readiness piece to that as well. I talked a lot about the CAF pillars and why they're so vitally important to our success as a team and as an individual. Why is that important? Because the balance and the harmony that you find in the CAF pillars, mental, physical, social, and spiritual, bring a wellness and resiliency to you. We heard about 47 airmen losing their life, $1.2 billion in accidents that could have been prevented. Who in here thinks the airmen that were involved in those or have lost their life wanted that to happen? I would offer none, right? But what led to some of that? I don't think people go out and say, hey, I'm going to make a bad decision today and it's going to cause an accident. I don't think that's the case. One of the things that I think leads to some of that is when individuals don't have those pillars balanced in their life. Are you tracking on this? Whoop. Stay with me here for a second. Mental strength. A lot of us are fatigued, right? We're burned out. I'm going to get to that over here in a minute. Do you think that could cause somebody to make maybe a poor decision? Fatigue? Yes. I've seen it firsthand. I can't tell you how many times we've had incidents in civil engineering where it was found out that the individual was stressed out, they were tired, their mental capacity was diminished. We need to take care of this first. Right? I see you nodding your head there, Boomer. You agree with that? Yes, sir. Right? That's a big part of being able to make educated decisions in risk management. To the left of the boom. You need to take care of yourself first before you can take care of the team and be part of this whole risk management, good decision-making matrix here, right? A healthy you, right, allows you to make good decisions when you're at work. We need a healthy you, right? Look at this bottom line here. General Alvin, right out of his brief. Our total force airmen are the Air Force's most important asset. The boss talked about what China is doing right now. I will tell you, in the profession of arms, what you do each and every day is inherently dangerous. And we can't lose any one of you. We need each and every one of you. So we need you to be healthy. We need to be mentally strong, socially strong, and spiritually strong. So you can go out and make good decisions. Right here is the stress levels. You can see your performance goes up if you're healthy, if you got your rest, if you're thinking straight. Right? Safety is enhanced. It all ties into itself, but it starts with each and every one of you taking care of yourself first. Who's heard the adage, put your mask on first? Why do you do that? Anybody? So you can help others, right? If you're not healthy, if you're not resilient, if you're not taking care of yourself, I don't even know if that really matters, anything after that, right? So take care of yourself first. Slide. All right. Everybody knows what my acronym is, ACT. So I thought I'd throw it in here when it comes to ORM and risk management. I will tell you, what is your attitude towards safety? What is it? The boss showed a slide earlier that talked about complacency. We've all heard the term complacency kills, right? 47 airmen know that. I'll tell you, what is your attitude? It always starts and ends with attitude. A great attitude is one of your best safety tools. I absolutely agree with that. If you go out there and, oh, this is the way we've always done it, this is the way we've always done it, and you start believing that and you start drifting away from what the safety practice is, this is when accidents happen. And we're all part of that. We all see it each and every day, right? And are we saying anything about it? Are we stopping it? Or don't we have the resources? Or the time? Or we're tired? Or our mental state isn't where it needs to be? I will tell you, attitude is everything. Safety and risk on and off duty. Full spectrum risk management to me has a lot to do with off duty too. I would offer that a lot of those 47 individuals that passed away in the last 12 months were from things that related to alcohol, maybe car accidents. I would say the majority is probably off duty. Are you using risk management in your daily life? Because there's so much more than operational risk management. What drives stress? Lack of finances, relationship stress. All these things add up. So what are you doing to better yourself off duty when it comes to those risks? We have a lot of individuals in this room that have a lot of time in service. Are we sharing our stories? To the boss's point, today is that day that you need to be doing that. It's a stand-up day for that exact reason. So please take advantage of it. When you go back and you want to get back in your computer and delete a couple emails, take some time to share those stories and go through the scenarios that I know that your safety individuals are going to have ready for you guys when we break off into small groups. Attitude. Does your unit have a culture of sensible risk-informed decision-making? Do they? Usually a leader's attitude and the leader's attitude in an organization will drive a culture. Do we agree with that? Positive or negative? Does your unit have a culture of sensible risk-informed decision-making? Adhering to basics. General Alvin talked about adhering to basics. You know that's important to me. Why is it important to get the basics right? Tanya, what do you think? Why is it important to get the basics right? You didn't know I was going to call on you, but that's what we do here.
It's like the foundation, Chief.
Woo. I didn't tell her that answer either. That was really good. I'm a CE guy. so we know how important it is to get the foundation right. Colonel Purcell. If your foundation is cracked and fractured, when you go to put those walls and roof on it, it's not going to survive the storm. And we need each and every one of you to be able to survive the storm that's coming, I promise. What is your culture, and what are you doing to make it better? I would offer that having the right attitude is the first step. Is your unit working as a team, too? Incorporate risk management into daily operations. That was a charge from the chief in his video. I can tell you, quick vignette, so many times when we're deployed, we talk about readiness and risk management and how important it is to be empowered as a team member to go out there in the absence of command, influence, and direction to be able to make a decision. I will tell you that there were some situations we got ourselves into in the Middle East that if we wouldn't have taken time to think through what we were about to do, could have ended up very poorly for all of us. But fortunately, we had a culture of taking care of each other and thinking through risk management steps in daily operations. Are you guys doing that each and every day? How many of the accidents are preventable that we have here on a yearly basis? That's interesting to think about. As a team, practicing operational discipline. What does that mean? What is operational discipline? What does that mean to a maintainer? Operational discipline. What does that mean to an engineer, an FSS troop, LRS? Operational discipline. I would link that to getting the standards right. Adherence to standards, strict adherence to standards, will enforce operational discipline. Having the right attitude towards those things, building the right culture, I guarantee will help you practice that operational discipline and incorporate risk management in your daily operations. Following established procedures and instructions, eliminate drift. Eliminate drift. Oh, we don't need to do that. We're in a hurry. I'm sure a lot of individuals in here have thought like that before. There will come a time where you might have to do something expedited. And you might have to be able to accept that risk. But day-to-day operations, we need to ensure that we're following established procedures and instructions and eliminate that drift. We need our teammates to know what right looks like. And we need to be the ones that are showing it to them. All right, next slide. All right, risk management made easy. Here's the strategically simplistic part of it. Right? Understanding risk management decisions. 2 W's, 3 H's. What can go wrong? This is as simple as it gets. Before you do something, what can go wrong? Are you thinking through it? What are the consequences of this? What we're about to go do? How can it happen? How likely is it to happen? And how can we mitigate that? Think about that. That is super simplistic. I put this slide up there because I really liked it. I took it out of the Chief's deck because that is something we can do each and every day. We all know the risk management matrix, right? Who in here is actually drawing out the risk management matrix before they go out and do something? Raise your hand. Oh, really? Okay, a couple. We don't all have that time to do that, right? We should, but this is very, very simplistic. Those 5 questions. What can go wrong? What are the consequences? How can it happen? How likely are they to happen? And how can we mitigate it? Share that with your teammates that aren't here. Next slide. Okay, a couple final thoughts. Number 1, take care of yourself. It's hard to take care of your teammate and make good decisions if you're not taking care of yourself. I'm telling you, get the basics right. Strict adherence to basics and standards. If I can't trust you to come to work on time, take care of yourself, I'm really going to have a hard time trusting you taking care of other people and getting a mission done. Take care of yourself. Act like an airman, big A airman, total force airman. Have the right attitude, build the right culture of safety, and work together as a team. And I promise you we'll be just fine. And my last thought, always be ready. Somebody asked me the other day, Chief, why do you wake up at 3:30 in the morning and go to the gym? Because it's my job. That's why. Because I might inspire somebody that sees me walking in there. Oh, Chief's at the gym. I'm doing the right thing. What does readiness mean to you? Because I will tell you, our adversaries are getting ready. And we need to have that same mindset. Always be ready. Because we don't want to do the enemy's job for them. We don't want to do the enemy's job for them. Any questions? Not one. Cass, no questions. Okay. All right. All right, that's all I got. Thank you, guys.
Our chief!
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
All right, so we're going to put up some safety statistics here in just a second. So what we want to do, go ahead and Bill. What today is about is taking that risk and uncertainty to our mission. Chief gave you some techniques. I like to think of it in terms of like scenario planning, scenario forecasting, that pre-mortem, that pre-accident investigation. That's what we're going to do today. I've got 3 adult children, which means that I have taught 3 kids how to drive. It's been some years now. But the hardest part about teaching them to drive was doing that scenario forecasting. You know, so you're going down the road or whatever, and you know, here's a car coming the other way. What are you going to do if that car suddenly swerves into your lane in front of you, or does an unexpected left turn right across your path? And invariably, my kids would say, "Well, why would they do that?" That's not the point. Can it happen? That's what we need to think through. So don't think about the probability, the plausibility. Think about the possibility. And that's what we need to explore. Where Chief and I are, we don't have the insight. You guys do. And so what we need to do is turn this around from where Sergeant Dager didn't know at the back, but the person at the back kind of has an inkling of like, hey, this is where we're taking some risks. And we need to communicate that across the organization. And go ahead and build for me. And we're good at that. We have been doing that for as long as Edwards has existed. We are professional risk managers as testers. And everyone's a part of that. If you don't think that the CDC doesn't pose a risk to our mission, you're mistaken. And so it cuts across. It doesn't matter where you are, what work center you're part of. You are contributing to the overall mission that is changing Chairman Xi's calculus about starting World War III. And there is risk to our people, and there is risk to our mission, and today we want to spend time doing that. And this is the place to do it. I mean, so many firsts. Those were all a bunch of firsts, and a bunch of history, and a bunch of legacy that all happened here at Edwards Air Force Base. You are part of that legacy. And so go ahead and go to the next final slide. That's what we're doing. All right, Panzer.
All right, thank you, General Wickert and Chief, for your words. So again, I'm Panzer, Lieutenant Colonel Morris, the Test Wing Chief of Safety. So you heard, some big picture stuff from the Chief of Staff, from the General, from the Chief about, why risk management matters, about how important every single one of you is to the mission. We can't afford to have anyone here in the room, anyone listening, get hurt in a mishap. We need all of our assets and our resources in order to be able to, pursue the mission of Edwards, pursue the mission of the Air Force. So I'm going to drill down kind of into the next level of specificity, talk about some mishap stats, talk about how we can prevent mishaps, and then start to talk about, risk management. And then later on today, you'll drill down further into increasing levels, lower levels. We have, an ops discussion after this, and then you'll go back to your work centers and have work center level discussions where you'll get into even more detail about specifically what is the operational risk management process, how to apply it, go through some scenarios, stuff like that. All right, next slide, please. All right, so we're going to start off with kind of our customary review of the annual mishap trend statistics. So what you're going to see, we're just looking at Class A mishaps. These, of course, are the most serious mishaps, the ones that the Air Force is the most concerned about. They typically involve loss of life, permanent disability, or loss of an aircraft, or a substantial amount, millions of dollars in damage. So looking across the last 10 years, you can see that on-duty mishaps, the rate has been fairly stable. The trend line is pretty much flat. So the good news is things aren't getting worse, but the bad news is we're not really getting any better at preventing mishaps. So we want to try and see, if we can bring those trend lines down. Next slide, please. All right, so manned aviation mishaps, so looking specifically at, mishaps where aircraft were involved. Again, trend line fairly flat across the last 10 years. Next slide. Unmanned aviation is one area where we are trending down on mishaps, at least in terms of the raw number, but if you look at the rate per flight hour or per 100K flight hour, again, it's remaining fairly stable. Next slide. Ground mishaps, again, a fairly flat trend line there. Next slide. Weapons, not very common. Next slide. Space, not really enough data to establish a good trend there. Next slide. Okay, these are fatalities specifically. So again, you can see it's a fairly flat trend line across the last 10 years. Next slide. Aviation fatalities, these kind of bounce around a bit. But they're showing us the average per year is kind of trending down. But again, the rate per 100K flying hours is bouncing around quite a lot, but it's kind of a flat trend line there. Next slide. Destroyed aircraft, again, the rate per 100K flying hours has decreased a little bit since 10 years ago, but still, not as low as we would like. Next slide. All right, so here we're getting into some stuff that doesn't impact like just on duty, just ops, aviation type stuff. These are motor vehicle mishaps. PMV4 is motor vehicle mishaps. So you can see that this is an area of significant risk for everyone in our force, right? Year after year we lose people from motor vehicle mishaps. So when you think about applying risk management, think about how you can apply it just to that day-to-day scenario of driving to work, right? I guarantee you there are ways that you can apply that risk management formula just very quickly before you get in the car to drive to work. Think about, what's the weather today? Do I have enough gas? Should I speed? Should I not speed? What route should I take? Is there likely to be obstructions on that route? That sort of stuff. You can take a few seconds to check the weather and see if there might be ice on the road. You can check the traffic conditions and see, if maybe you should consider an alternate route. But it all just comes down to making smart decisions, not driving if you're under the influence, not driving if you're too fatigued to do it safely, right? Sometimes the risk management decision needs to be, I need to not get in the car. I need to, find a dark corner and take a nap before I try and drive that hour home or something like that so that I can be a little bit more alert. Next slide. All right, this slide caught my attention. This is significant. So PMV2, this is motorcycle fatalities. So you can see here that this is kind of an upward trend over the last 10 years of increasing rates of motorcycle fatalities. And of note for this, if you look at, for last year, 15, and then can you flip back one slide, please? 11 for cars, and then go forward. 15 for motorcycles. There are far fewer people in the Air Force that ride motorcycles than there are people that drive cars. So the fact that more people died from motorcycle accidents than died from car driving accidents tells me that this is an area where we really need to be applying those risk management principles and paying attention to that. So you might ask, what are some things that we can do here? Well, again, coming down to that cultural element that a number of people mentioned already, at your units, You need to, supervisors, commanders, you need to be aware of what folks in your units are riding motorcycles. If you are a coworker of somebody who you know is riding a motorcycle, take a second to ask them the question, hey, have you talked to the motorcycle safety rep? Every unit that has motorcycle riders should have a motorcycle safety rep. So it's incumbent on everyone that is a motorcycle rider, everyone that supervises a motorcycle rider, or anyone that knows a motorcycle rider. Put them in touch with your motorcycle safety rep. Motorcycle safety rep will know what training requirements, what PPE requirements there are for that individual so that they can get educated and again, coming back to that culture of compliance, following the Air Force regs, to try and reduce some of those motorcycle mishaps. But again, a lot of it just comes down to your personal day-to-day decisions. Is today a good day for me to go and ride that motorcycle, or is this a day where maybe I should consider a different option? All right, next slide. All right, so we talked about some statistics, but the obvious question is, why do mishaps occur, right? Next slide. So this is a model of thinking about mishaps that I like, that I'm sure many of you have seen before and are familiar with. This is Reason's Swiss cheese model. So in Reason's Swiss cheese model, we have the hazard at one end, which is the thing that could potentially cause a mishap. And then at the other end, we have the mishap or injury. In between those things, there's a series of layers. You can call them defenses, you can call them mitigations, you can call them risk controls. But there are a series of things that are there that are intended to prevent that hazard from becoming a mishap, right? Now, for each one of those layers, there are some holes or gaps in that layer, which is why we use the example of a slice of Swiss cheese. So those layers can be anything from organizational controls, which are regulations, or the culture that is set by the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, right? They come down to supervision. So what are the first line supervisors doing? Are you encouraging your people to follow those regulations? Are you setting a culture of safety? Or is it a supervisor that's encouraging people to cut corners and really emphasizing the need to hurry everything along, or no, that doesn't matter, or you don't need to pay attention to that, right? And then, those are kind of the organizational influences, and then you get into, as you get closer and closer to the person that is either going to be the person that the mishap occurs to, or the person that was the last one to touch the airplane that the mishap occurs to. We start looking into things like preconditions, how was the weather that day? How rested was that individual? Those sort of things. And then you finally get to the acts. They didn't torque the bolt tight enough, right? They pushed the wrong control in the aircraft cockpit. Those are the acts that ultimately lead to a mishap. So all along the way, there's all of these opportunities where a mishap can be prevented with different layers of risk management. But each one of those, there's some holes. And when the mishap occurs, we think about, you line up all those slices of cheese, and most of the time, there's at least one slice of cheese that the hole is not aligned and the mishap is trapped or caught, blocked from passing through, right? The hazard is trapped and is not able to pass through and cause the mishap. But as you start removing those slices of cheese from your stack or your deck of cheese slices, it becomes easier and easier for the holes in those slices of cheese to line up, and easier for that hazard to pass through and become a mishap. All right, next slide, please. So one thing that always comes up, or nearly always comes up in a mishap, is the concept of human factors, right? Rarely does a mishap occur just because of random chance. Like we say in the safety school, you never read a mishap report that says the crew were flying along, everything was fine, and then the airplane just exploded for no reason, right? There's always stuff that led to that, and usually it comes down to human error. Even if there was a mechanical defect or a manufacturing defect, somewhere along the line, as you dig into that, you find that someone made a choice either to, accept a substandard part, or to not to follow a TO, or, something along those lines that led to that happening. So when you're investigating mishaps, it's tempting to just look at the individual's acts. Okay, the pilot, didn't execute his engine out landing properly. Well, but why? What led him to that point where he needed to execute an engine out landing? Why wasn't he able to execute the landing properly? How was his training? How was his personal condition that day, right? So we look further and further back into supervisory factors, organizational factors, to kind of explain why those individuals closest to the mishap took those actions, right? And here's a quote: "Human error failures can only be understood by looking at the whole system in which the behavior took place. In our reactions to failure, we often focus on the sharp end where people were closest to potentially preventing the mishap." All right, next slide, please. So drilling down even further, in human factors, we tend to divide those into active failures or unsafe acts. Those are the things that the person did or failed to do that either caused or failed to prevent the mishap. And then the latent failures or unsafe conditions. These are errors that exist within the organization or within the chain of command that set the stage or created the conditions for that mishap to occur, right? And the key thing to understand about these latent failures is that they can exist for a long, long time, years even, before they finally cause a mishap, right? There can be ways that a TO that was written that were incorrect that no one recognized until a very specific set of circumstances happened, and then you realize, oh my gosh, we were doing this wrong all along, and it contributed to this mishap occurring. There can be a culture that is set within an organization at any level that seems fine for a long time, again, until something happens and you realize, why were we doing that all of this time? We should have known that that was contributing to an unsafe situation, right? So again, the key here, I think, the thing that you can do, that all of us can do, is try and stop those latent failures, right? It's easy to point your finger at the person who, didn't meet their training requirements and then they screwed up a specific act at the time of the mishap, right? It's easy to point that out, and the culture of compliance, following TOs that we're going to talk about more, will help to prevent those sort of things. But what all of you can do every day, in your work centers and even in your day-to-day life is look out for those latent failures. Look around and say, what are the things that we've been taking for granted, that we've been doing every day as day-to-day business that maybe aren't right, that maybe could contribute to a mishap occurring, even though one hasn't happened yet directly because of this, right? Next slide, please. So that kind of plays into, again, feeding off that culture of compliance, some of the things that the general said, the chief said. This is Dr. Diane Vaughn. She's a professor at Columbia University, and she was part of the accident investigation for the Challenger space shuttle disaster, right? And she has written a number of books about organizational culture, specifically as it relates to risk management and safety and those sort of things, right? And she coined this term, normalization of deviance, the process by which deviance from correct or proper behavior becomes normalized in a corporate culture. Unsafe practice comes to be considered normal if it does not immediately cause a catastrophe, right? So that's very similar to the concept of complacency, right? You just accept that this is the way we do things, even though maybe it isn't the way the TOs tell you to do it, it isn't the way the regulations tell you to do it. But hey, it's been fine so far, right? So it must be fine. And more of these tend to creep in an organization as they get ignored, and that becomes the normalization of deviance. So, this is my comment at the bottom there. Again, this is really something that I want to drive home that I think everyone can be empowered to do from the lowest level up to the commanders, is try and stop that normalization of deviance, right? Stop that complacency by, as the chief said, there are times where that mission, that situation, we're trying to empower people to make decisions at the lowest level. There may be times where you have to take risks. There may even be times where the situation is so dire that you need to violate a TO. In flight, the pilot is empowered to take any action that they deem necessary in an emergency for the safety of personnel and the aircraft, right? But they're going to have to answer for how that turned out at the end, right? But you have to be able to recognize, is this a situation that calls for that, Or is this a situation where we can actually slow things down or take a step back and make sure that we're complying with all of these, regulations, procedures, best practices that we know, right? So it's really down to a culture at every level of organizations to say, we are a culture that is going to take safety seriously. We are a culture that is not going to accept unnecessary risks, that is not going to cut corners unless we have a very specific reason for doing that and we know exactly what we're getting out of that and how we're going to answer the mail on that, right? And so that's, again, everyone at the culture, at the unit culture can contribute to that, but especially commanders, supervisors, and stop that normalization of deviance, bring things back to the way that you know in your gut that right looks, right? Next slide, please. All right, so how do we present mishaps? Glad you asked. The answer is risk management, right? Next slide. So drilling down a little bit more detail from what you got from the previous speakers in risk management. Risk management is a decision-making process that systematically evaluates courses of action, outcomes of those courses of action, and helps you to decide what is the best course of action, right? Most of you have seen that risk management process. It was up earlier in the chief's slide, right? But one of the key fundamentals of risk management, again, is accept no unnecessary risk, right? Know what risk there are, know what risks are necessary, and don't accept any more risks than what are necessary. Next slide. So we've heard this phrase, discipline operations, risk management. This is the foundation of the foundation of disciplined operations as it applies to risk management is compliance with standing guidance, right? We've probably mostly heard the phrase, the TOs or the regs are written in blood, right? Many of those things that are in the regulations for safety purposes are there because someone was hurt or killed or something was lost. And they decided, well, this was an opportunity for us to insert a slice of cheese into that deck to try and stop this mishap, right, by writing something into this regulation. So there's a reason why everything is there. It isn't always written in the best possible language, right? There's always room to wordsmith stuff. But there's a reason why everything in there is there. We don't write regulations just to waste people's time, right? However, guidance can't cover every possible situation, right? So that's where you need to apply your own knowledge, your own training, your own best practices, and be able to make those agile yet sound decisions in the moment, right, to prevent mishaps from occurring, to apply good risk management. Next slide. Discipline operations. So again, just highlighting, not following technical orders has led to fatalities. It has led to loss. And this is managed by adhering to technical orders, right? Talking about agile combat employment and mission-ready airmen, which are, hot topics these days. We need to train our airmen to be risk aware. And again, this happens at every level, down to the lowest level supervisors. When you're training that new airman, make sure that you're teaching them, about the specific risks of the environment they're working in. And later, NORAD is going to talk to you, the ops community, about a specific mishap that I was actually the lead investigator for, where a person died. And, that was an opportunity where someone could have been trained better, right, that could have prevented the mishap. So you'll hear more about a specific scenario there. But being proficient at your job, having your foundational skills, those are something that every one of us can be responsible for, that is going to help you to manage risk and help you to prevent mishaps from occurring. Next slide. At the supervisory level, what can you do? You can lead by example, right? Set the example of adhering to those, guidance, of making sound decisions, of applying the risk management process. You can acknowledge and validate adherence to standards from the people that are working with you, right? Reinforce to them that that's the right thing to do and that you support them doing that. You can encourage people to internalize and act upon their lessons learned. When a mistake occurs, which they usually do, take a moment to step back and, gather people around and talk about that mistake, not to shame someone, but like, why did this occur? What can we learn from this and how can we do better next time, right? Promote accountability and cross-functional knowledge throughout your organization, and make sure that everyone, including yourself, is receiving the proper training on essential procedures. Next slide. Risk management does not sanction or justify violation of any guidance, right? So, there may be those very rare emergency situations where you do need to do that. But just saying, oh, I applied the risk management process and I decided to go ahead and violate guidance, that's not an acceptable answer, right? Doesn't override standards and criteria, doesn't replace training, practice, drills, rehearsals, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Those are all very valuable things that everyone should be taking seriously in order to reduce risk. And it doesn't remove risk altogether or support a zero defect mindset. I hope everyone, especially in leadership, has the attitude that some mistakes will occur. It's important that we learn from those mistakes, and it's important that we try to just make sure that those mistakes don't be repeated, they don't become a habit, and that we minimize those mistakes as much as we can. But when you're dealing with individuals that may have made a mistake, I hope most of you have the attitude of, is this a correctable mistake? Is this something that we can learn from? Or, is this a serious deviation that really needs to be, dealt with, right? And it doesn't inhibit flexibility, initiative, or accountability of any chosen course of action. You can be innovative, you can be creative, just make sure that those courses of action are adhering to guidance and are, a sound, risk-aware decision. Next slide. So what we need from every one of you at every level is to embrace risk management principles, right? Think about what decisions you need to make. Acknowledge that you are not the expert on risk management, and so seek out the advice of experts if you need it to understand the risks that you're taking or how to mitigate those. And throughout everything that you're doing, have a risk management mindset. Think about, just take a couple seconds in the back of your mind to think about what could go wrong with what I'm about to do, and how can I put defenses or mitigations in place that will prevent that from occurring. Just as a quick example, for me, over the holiday weekend, I was cleaning out my garage, and I was trying to sweep a space that was in between the bumper of my car and the garage door, right? And I thought, I should probably go open the garage door to give me more space to work. But I was like, that'll take an extra 30 seconds, so I'm not going to do that. So I tried to squeeze myself in there, and I ended up hitting my head on the back of the garage door and cutting my head. You might still be able to see the mark on my head. If I had hair, it wouldn't be such an issue, right? Because my hair would have been a defense that would have protected my head. But again, I kind of had in the back of my mind, I should open the garage door before I try and squeeze in here. But I decided to take a shortcut. I did it anyways, and it resulted in a very, very minor mishap, right? All right, next slide. So ultimately, risk management is kind of a systematic way of thinking about how do we add more slices of Swiss cheese into that deck, right? Poor risk management, we only have 2 slices of cheese in there. It's very easy for that hazard to find 2 holes aligned and pass through and cause a mishap. But the more and more slices of cheese that we add to that deck, the more mitigations, the more risk management strategies that we apply, the harder it is for that mishap to pass through. So that concludes this portion of my presentation. Any questions about anything that I talked about so far? Okay, so before we take a break, again, I just want to thank the General, the Chief of Staff for your words. Very on point, very much exactly the message that I hope my words synergized with as well. Before we let everybody go, the ops and maintenance community will be remaining here, and I just want to emphasize this is basically everyone that is a flyer, a test essential personnel, or a maintainer that has hands-on aircraft in some way. That's a change from previous years. We are including maintainers today. This will be the privilege safety information section of the brief in here coming up next. So if you're not sure what privilege safety information is or whether you should be having access to it, ask somebody next to you to clarify. But again, the intent is all ops personnel that are directly involved in operations, test essential personnel, maintainers will be staying here and we'll be talking through the safety privilege information stuff. Everyone else is going to be released to go back to your work centers, and hopefully your work centers have an agenda lined up for you back there. Bill, anything else I need to cover announcements-wise before we let everybody go? Okay. All right, so thanks very much for your attention this morning, everyone. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to emphasize. If you're watching online, the privilege safety portion of the briefing will not be transmitted online. So if you are elsewhere on base, please use this time between now and 10 o'clock to go ahead and come over here to the theater so that you can be a part of that discussion. All right, thanks very much, everyone.